My son said he was taking me to a luxury nursing home so I could relax. 2 weeks later, he stopped visiting. By the third month, he blocked my number. But here's the thing, when I died, he didn't just lose me. He lost everything. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you thought you could trust, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about love, loss, and a final act that left my greedy son shattered. Hi, my name is Margaret, and this is the story of how my only son abandoned me to rot in a nursing home, and how I destroyed him with my final breath. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and for most of my life I believed family was everything. My late husband, Richard, and I built our lives around our only child, Thomas. He was our pride, our joy, the center of our world. We weren't wealthy when we started out, far from it. Richard worked 2 jobs, and I stitched clothes at night just to make ends meet. Every penny we saved, every sacrifice we made was for Thomas. When Thomas was little, he was this bright, sweet boy who would run into my arms after school, smelling like grass and sunshine, holding up some messy finger painting like it was a masterpiece. I remember thinking, we must be doing something right. Look how happy he is. But somewhere along the line, something changed. Maybe it was when he went off to college in the city. Maybe it was the friends he made, or maybe it was just who he truly was deep down. By the time he graduated, he barely called. He'd visit once a month, always rushing, always with some excuse about work. Then Richard passed away. It was sudden, a heart attack in his sleep. My world shattered that day. I expected Thomas to step up, to be my rock the way his father had been. But instead, he seemed detached. He handled the funeral arrangements like it was just another business transaction. That was the first time I saw the coldness in his eyes. Over the next few years, I started noticing subtle hints that Thomas was more interested in what I had than in how I was. I'd catch him glancing at my jewelry box, or asking pointed questions about the house and the bank accounts. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself, he's just concerned about my future. But deep down, I knew better. By the time I turned 78, my health had begun to decline. My knees ached, my memory sometimes faltered, and the big house Richard and I had built together felt too empty and too large for me alone. Thomas started visiting more often then, suddenly all charm and smiles, bringing me my favorite pastries, asking if I needed help with bills or groceries. For a moment my heart soared. He loves me, he really does care. Oh, how naive I was. One sunny afternoon, Thomas showed up with a brochure. It was glossy and full of pictures of happy seniors playing bingo and laughing in lush gardens. "Mom," he said gently, his hand covering mine, "I think it's time we got you somewhere safe. Somewhere you can be cared for properly. This place is amazing, you'll love it." My throat tightened. "Thomas, I don't want to leave my home. This is where your father and I—" He interrupted smoothly. "I know, Mom, I know, but it's too much for you to handle now. And besides," he added with a little laugh, "this place has better food than you've had in years." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my son was thinking of me, not my house, not the inheritance. So I agreed. 2 weeks later, he drove me to the nursing home. It wasn't nearly as luxurious as the brochure had promised. The paint was chipped, the hallways smelled faintly of bleach and sadness, and the staff looked overworked. I turned to Thomas, my heart sinking. This isn't what you showed me." He squeezed my shoulder, avoiding my gaze. "Don't worry, Mom, it'll be fine, just give it a chance." The first week, he visited twice. By the second week, only once. By the end of the first month, I hadn't seen him at all. I called, no answer. I texted, nothing. Then one day, I tried calling again, and the line went straight to voicemail. That's when I realized he had blocked me. I sat on that narrow, creaky bed, clutching the phone, my chest aching worse than it ever had. I wasn't just abandoned. I was discarded. The following weeks blurred together. Meals, medication, lonely nights staring at the ceiling. I felt invisible until the day I met Harold. Harold was the janitor, a tall, wiry man in his 50s with kind eyes and a quiet voice. He always whistled as he mopped the floors, a soft tune that reminded me of lullabies from long ago. One evening, I was sitting in the common room, staring blankly out the window, when Harold passed by. He paused, hesitated, then said, "You look like you could use a cup of tea, ma'am." I almost laughed. A cup of tea, after everything, but there was something so genuine in his voice that I nodded. That night, we sat together in the break room, sipping tea from mismatched mugs. He listened, really listened, as I poured out my story. From that day on, Harold became my lifeline. But Thomas had no idea what kind of bond was forming. And when he finally returned, months later, he came with a smile that chilled my blood, and a plan that would change everything. When Thomas finally walked back into that dreary nursing home after months of silence, he didn't even look at me like I was his mother. He looked at me like I was a bank account with legs. He waltzed in wearing a crisp navy suit and an expensive watch I didn't recognize. His hair was perfectly styled, and he smelled like some cologne that probably cost more than my monthly medication bill. "Mom," he said loudly, spreading his arms as if he were some prodigal son returning home. His voice was too cheerful, too rehearsed. "Look at you. You're doing great here, huh?" I stared at him, my hands trembling in my lap. "Thomas, where have you been? You didn't answer my calls," I thought. He cut me off, flashing that salesman's grin. "I've just been so busy, Mom. You know how work is. But I'm here now." Harold happened to be mopping nearby, and I caught the way he narrowed his eyes slightly, watching Thomas like a hawk. Harold gave me a small, reassuring nod before slipping quietly out of the room. Thomas pulled a chair close and sat down, leaning forward like he was about to share a secret. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, your future and mine." My stomach turned. Something about his tone made my skin crawl. "I know you've been lonely here," he continued smoothly, "and I hate that, I really do. But we both know you can't take care of that big old house anymore. It's just sitting there empty. And honestly, Mom, it's not safe for it to be unoccupied." My heart sank. There it is, the house. "What are you suggesting?" I asked quietly. He reached into his sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "I found a buyer. They're willing to pay top dollar, and I can handle all the logistics for you. All you have to do is sign here, here, and here." He slid the papers across the table, like it was no big deal. I didn't touch them. Instead, I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw greed shining in his eyes like a spotlight. There was no love there, no concern, just hunger. "Thomas," I whispered, my voice breaking, "are you trying to sell my home behind my back?" He forced a laugh, feigning hurt. "Our home, Mom, I grew up there too, remember? I just want to help. Think of it as simplifying things for you." For a moment, I almost gave in. I was tired, so tired, and it would have been easier to just let him handle everything. But then I thought about all the nights Richard and I had stayed up late, painting those walls, building that garden, scraping together money to pay the mortgage. And I thought about Harold. Sweet Harold, who brought me tea when no one else cared, who listened to my stories about Richard without rolling his eyes, who made me feel like I still mattered. "Let me think about it," I said finally, pushing the papers back toward him. His smile faltered, just for a second, then he plastered it back on. "Of course, Mom, take all the time you need." But his eyes told a different story. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the fluorescent lights, my mind racing. I knew what Thomas was doing. He was waiting for me to die. Whether it was next year or next week, he wanted my house, my savings, everything. And for the first time, I asked myself a terrifying question. What if I didn't give it to him? The thought was like a spark in the darkness. Over the next few weeks, I started talking to Harold more and more. He'd tell me about his life, how he'd grown up poor, how he'd taken this janitor job to support his daughter through nursing school. His hands were always rough from scrubbing floors, but his touch was gentle when he helped me with my walker. One afternoon, while we were sitting outside in the small, sad courtyard, I told him the truth. "Harold," I said softly, "my son wants to sell my house. He wants everything, and when I'm gone, he'll get it all." Harold frowned deeply, his brow furrowing. "That doesn't seem right, ma'am. You've worked your whole life for that, you and your husband." I looked at him, my heart pounding. What if I didn't leave it to him? What if I left it to someone who actually deserved it? He blinked, clearly taken aback. "Ma'am, are you saying?" "Yes," my voice shook, but my resolve didn't. "Harold, you've been kinder to me in these past few months than my own son has been in years. If anyone should benefit from my life's work, it's you." He stared at me like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. "Margaret, I couldn't, that's too much." I reached out, taking his calloused hand in mine. "You've given me more than you realize. You've given me dignity, hope, a reason to keep living even when I felt abandoned. Please, Harold, let me do this." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. From that day forward, we began to plan in secret. I contacted a lawyer, an old friend of Richard's, who still owed me a favor. We met privately in the dusty little library of the nursing home, Harold always standing guard outside to make sure Thomas didn't show up unexpectedly. The lawyer was shocked when I explained what I wanted. "Are you certain about this, Margaret? Once it's done, there's no going back. Your son will be, well, furious is an understatement." I smiled bitterly. "Let him be furious. He left me to rot in this place. He doesn't deserve a single dime." The will was rewritten that very night. Every penny, every asset, every square inch of my beloved home, all of it went to Harold. It felt like reclaiming my power, like taking back the years Thomas had stolen from me with his indifference and greed. When Harold signed the final document as witness, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "I won't let you down." But we both knew the real storm hadn't even started yet. Because Thomas wasn't going to just sit quietly and wait for his payday. He came back the next week, and this time his smile was gone. "Mom," he said sharply, slamming his hand on the table, "we need to talk. I know what you're up to." My blood ran cold. Thomas's words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I sat frozen, my breath shallow, as his angry voice echoed through the sterile, bleach-scented room. The other residents sitting in the common area turned their heads briefly, then quickly looked away. They had seen scenes like this before, family members arguing, emotions boiling over, but this felt different. "Mom," Thomas repeated, his tone dripping with barely contained fury, "I'm not stupid. You've been avoiding my calls about the paperwork. And I know you've been meeting with someone, a lawyer." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "Thomas, calm down. We can discuss this calmly." "Calmly," he snapped, his face flushing red. "I moved you here so you could be safe and cared for, and this is how you repay me, by sneaking around behind my back." I wanted to laugh bitterly at the absurdity of his words. Moved me here. No, he had dumped me here like an unwanted piece of furniture. But I forced myself to stay steady. "Thomas, I'm allowed to make decisions about my own life, about my own affairs." His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Affairs? Don't play games with me, Mom. I know you've been talking to that janitor." My stomach dropped. "Harold," I tried to keep my voice neutral, but panic was clawing at my insides. "Yeah, him," Thomas sneered. "That creepy old guy who's always lurking around. Don't think I haven't noticed. You've been confiding in him, haven't you? What you think he cares about you? He's probably just using you, Mom, trying to get close so he can take your money." The venom in his words made my hands tremble. Harold, of all people, didn't have a greedy bone in his body. He had been there for me when my own son had vanished without a trace. "Thomas," I said quietly, "Harold is more of a son to me than you've been these past few years." His face twisted in rage. "What did you just say to me?" The room went utterly silent. Even the TV in the corner seemed to hush, its game show muted as every pair of eyes turned toward us. I took a deep breath, my resolve solidifying. "You heard me. Harold has shown me kindness, compassion, things you seem to have forgotten." Thomas slammed his fists on the table so hard that a cup of water tipped over, spilling across the cheap plastic surface. "You ungrateful," he stopped himself, lowering his voice to a deadly whisper. "You listen to me, Mom. You sign those papers or you'll regret it. You think you can just cut me out of your life, out of what's rightfully mine. You have no idea what I'm capable of." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Before I could respond, Harold appeared in the doorway. He must have heard the shouting from the hall. "Everything okay here, Mrs. Whittaker?" Harold's voice was calm but firm, his tall frame casting a protective shadow over me. Thomas shot him a glare so full of hatred it made me flinch. "Stay out of this, Janitor," he spat, his lip curling. "This is family business." Harold didn't move. "When you raise your voice like that, it becomes everyone's business. I think you should leave, sir." For a moment, I thought Thomas might actually attack him. His fists clenched, his body tense, his breath coming in sharp bursts. But then he smirked, a cruel, dangerous smile. "Fine," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll leave, for now, but don't think this is over, Mom." He stormed out, the automatic doors banging open as he shoved past a startled nurse. I sat there, shaking, tears spilling down my cheeks. Harold knelt beside me, his warm hand steadying mine. "Don't worry," he said softly. "He won't hurt you, I won't let him." But even Harold's reassuring words couldn't drown out the fear curling in my gut. Because deep down, I knew Thomas wasn't done. The next few weeks were tense and unsettling. Thomas didn't visit, but I could feel his presence like a storm gathering on the horizon. I started noticing little things, a nurse mentioning that someone had called asking about my medical records, or a strange man parked in a car just beyond the nursing home gates, engine idling as he stared at the building. Harold noticed too. One evening, as we sat sipping tea in the break room, he leaned forward and said, "Margaret, I think Thomas might be watching you." I gripped my mug tighter. "Watching me? Why, what could he possibly?" "Because he suspects you've changed your will," Harold said bluntly. "And if I know men like him, he won't stop until he gets what he wants." My heart pounded. "What do we do?" Harold hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered notebook. Inside, he had written meticulous notes, dates, times, descriptions of anything unusual. "We document everything," he said firmly. "Every visit, every phone call, every strange thing that happens. If he tries something, we'll have proof." I nodded, feeling both grateful and terrified. Harold was right, we had to be careful. 2 weeks later, Thomas returned. This time he didn't come alone. With him was a woman I'd never seen before, tall, with sharp features and a tailored gray suit. She carried a briefcase and introduced herself with a cold smile. "Mrs. Whittaker," she said smoothly. "I'm Catherine, your son's attorney. We're here to finalize the paperwork regarding the sale of your property." My throat went dry. I told Thomas I wasn't ready to sell. Catherine's smile didn't waver. "Of course, but it's really just a formality. We can walk you through everything step by step." Thomas placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip just a little too tight. "Come on, Mom, don't make this difficult. This is for your own good." Harold appeared then, standing tall in the doorway. His presence was like a shield. "Mrs. Whittaker," he said firmly, "you don't have to sign anything you don't want to sign." Thomas glared at him. "You again? God, this is pathetic. She's my mother, not yours. Get out." Harold didn't budge. "Not until I know she's safe." The tension in the room was suffocating. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Thomas," I said, my voice trembling, "please, just give me some time." He leaned down, his face inches from mine, his voice a whisper meant only for me. "You've already had time, Mom. Too much time. Sign the papers or I'll make sure you regret it." My vision blurred with tears. Is that a threat? His smile was pure malice. "It's a promise." Then he straightened, plastering on a fake cheerful expression for Harold and Catherine. "We'll be back in a few days. Think it over, Mom." When they left, Harold crouched beside me, his jaw tight with anger. "This is getting dangerous," he said. "We need to be ready." I nodded weakly. Ready for what? For whatever Thomas does next. Because we both knew Thomas was about to cross a line he could never come back from. And when he did, I would be ready to destroy him. The next few days felt like walking on thin ice over a freezing lake, every creek beneath me threatening to give way. My heart never stopped pounding. Every knock at my door, every footstep echoing in the nursing home halls sent me into a panic spiral. Thomas had shown his hand, the threats, the intimidation, bringing a lawyer into my home like I was some helpless old fool who couldn't think for herself. But the way he'd looked at me when he whispered those words, "Sign the papers or you'll regret it." It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise of war. Harold, bless him, stayed close to me every single day. He'd adjusted his cleaning schedule so he was always nearby, quietly keeping watch. To the other residents, he was just the janitor, a kind, soft-spoken man with a mop and a warm smile. But to me, he was my shield, my silent guardian. Late one evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Harold and I sat in the dimly lit break room, our mugs of tea growing cold as we whispered about what to do. "Margaret," he said, his deep voice low and serious, "Thomas isn't going to stop. He's desperate, and desperate men make reckless choices." I rubbed my trembling hands together. What kind of choices?" Harold hesitated, then met my eyes. "I think he might try to force you, or worse." My breath caught. "Worse, Harold, you don't think he'd hurt me?" He didn't answer right away, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. I swallowed hard. "My own son, my only son," my voice cracked. "How did it come to this?" Harold reached across the table and took my hand gently in his rough, work-worn one. "Because greed twists people, Margaret. You've seen it, I've seen it. But listen to me, he may be cunning, but he's not as smart as he thinks he is. We can outmaneuver him, we just have to be careful." I nodded, wiping my tears. "I trust you, Harold, more than I trust anyone." That night, I made a vow. Thomas would never, ever get a single penny of what Richard and I built. If he wanted war, then war he would have. The following morning, I decided to take a stand. When Thomas arrived, unannounced as always, I was waiting for him in the common area, Harold standing discreetly nearby, pretending to mop. "Thomas," I said, my voice steady even though my insides were trembling, "I've made my decision. I'm not signing those papers. The house stays with me." For a brief moment, his mask slipped, and pure, unfiltered rage flashed across his face. Then he quickly covered it with a fake, charming smile. "Mom," he said smoothly, "you're clearly confused. You're under a lot of stress here. Maybe this environment isn't good for you. You need somewhere peaceful, somewhere private." Harold stiffened behind me, sensing danger. "What do you mean private?" I asked cautiously. Thomas's smile widened. I've been looking into other care facilities. Smaller ones, more specialized, places where you'll get the attention you need. A cold chill ran down my spine. He wasn't talking about care, he was talking about control. Absolutely not, I said firmly. I'm staying right here. His expression hardened. You don't have a choice, Mom. If I have to get the courts involved, I will. I am your legal next of kin. Harold took a step forward, his voice calm but unyielding. Not if Mrs. Whittaker has already appointed someone else to manage her affairs. Thomas whirled on him, his face contorting with fury. Stay out of this, you worthless janitor. I gasped, Thomas. But Harold didn't flinch. She's free to choose who she trusts, and clearly it isn't you. Thomas glared at me, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. You're making a mistake, Mom, a huge mistake. That man, he jabbed a finger toward Harold, is manipulating you. He's after your money just like everyone else. I rose from my chair, shaky but determined. No, Thomas, you are. Harold has done nothing but care for me when you couldn't even bother to answer my calls. The entire room fell silent. Nurses paused mid-step, residents held their breath, all eyes on us. Thomas's face darkened. You'll regret this, he hissed. Then he stormed out, slamming the automatic doors so hard they rattled on their tracks. That night, Harold and I knew it was time to prepare for the worst. Margaret, Harold said as he carefully locked the break room door, we need evidence. Hard proof that Thomas is trying to coerce you. If he ever tries to challenge the will, this is what will protect you and me. We devised a plan. The next time Thomas visited, I would wear a small recording device hidden inside my cardigan pocket. Harold had borrowed it from a friend who worked security. It was simple but effective, just a little black box with a blinking red light, ready to capture every poisonous word out of Thomas's mouth. 3 days later, the opportunity came. Thomas arrived again, this time alone. His mood was strange, too cheerful, like a snake offering a handshake. Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. His lips were cold. I'm sorry about the other day. I overreacted. I just want what's best for you. I forced a polite smile. I appreciate that, Thomas. We sat in my small, cramped room, Harold conveniently nearby, pretending to fix a squeaky wheel on a food cart. Thomas leaned in close. Listen, Mom, I've been thinking. If you sign the house over to me, I promise I'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about bills or repairs or anything. Doesn't that sound nice? It does, I said cautiously, but I'm still not ready. His tone sharpened instantly. Then maybe I should make you ready. My pulse raced, but I stayed silent, letting him dig his own grave. You see, Mom, he continued, his voice low and menacing, I'm done asking nicely. If you don't cooperate, I'll move you to a private facility, one where visitors aren't allowed. You'll be completely cut off. Do you understand me? I gasped softly, playing the role of the frightened mother. Thomas, you wouldn't. Oh, I would, he sneered. And when you're gone, well, I'll be the one making all the decisions, won't I? Harold's jaw tightened, his hands clenching around the mop handle, but he didn't move. He knew we needed this recorded. And that janitor, Thomas spat the word like poison, he won't be around forever either. People like him, accidents happen. That was it, the final damning piece of evidence. My hands trembled inside my cardigan pocket, but I pressed the tiny button to stop the recording. Thomas had no idea, he had just sealed his own fate. When he finally left, Harold rushed to my side. Did you get it? I nodded, tears of relief streaming down my face. Every word. Harold took the recorder carefully, holding it like treasure. This is it, Margaret. This is how we take him down. But even as he spoke, a sense of dread settled in my chest. Because Thomas wasn't going to wait patiently while we plotted. He was about to make his next move, and it would be his most dangerous one yet. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I barely slept, barely ate. Harold and I kept the recorder hidden, making backup copies on his friend's computer just in case something happened to the original. Every time the phone rang or a car pulled into the parking lot, my heart nearly stopped. Thomas had crossed the line. He had threatened to lock me away, to isolate me completely, and even hinted at harming Harold. That wasn't just greed anymore, that was malice. We knew he wouldn't wait long to act. And we were right. 2 mornings later, just as the sun was rising and painting the sky a pale gold, the nursing home erupted in chaos. I woke to shouting and hurried footsteps. Peeking through the crack of my door, I saw 2 large men in suits walking down the hallway beside Thomas. Their expressions were grim, purposeful. Harold appeared seconds later, his face pale but determined. "Margaret, they're here for you," he whispered urgently. "He's trying to move you out, probably to one of those private facilities he mentioned. Once you're gone, he'll control everything." My blood ran cold. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Harold nodded sharply. "Stay calm. I've called the lawyer and the police. They're on their way, but we need to stall." The next few minutes were a blur. Thomas stormed into my room like a hurricane, his fake smile nowhere to be found. "Mom," he said in a voice dripping with false sweetness, "we're taking you to a better place today. Pack your things." "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear. His face darkened instantly. "Yes, you are." One of the suited men stepped forward, holding out paperwork. "Mrs. Whittaker, we've been hired to transport you safely. Please cooperate." Harold stepped in front of me like a human shield. "She's not going anywhere." Thomas sneered. "Move, janitor, before you regret it." Harold didn't budge. "You're done threatening her, Thomas." At that moment, the distant wail of police sirens filled the air. Thomas's head whipped toward the sound, his eyes widening in alarm. "What did you do?" he hissed. "I protected myself," I said quietly, my trembling hands gripping the recorder hidden under my blanket. The doors burst open, and 2 uniformed officers strode in, accompanied by my lawyer. "Mrs. Whittaker," the lead officer said kindly, "we received a report of attempted coercion and unlawful detainment. Can you explain what's going on here?" Before I could speak, Thomas jumped in. "Officers, there's been a misunderstanding. My mother's confused, she's not well." I cut him off, my voice rising with righteous fury. "I am perfectly well, Thomas, and I have proof of everything you've done." I held up the recorder with shaking hands. Harold stepped forward, pressing the play button. The room filled with Thomas's own voice. "If you don't cooperate, I'll move you to a private facility, one where visitors aren't allowed. You'll be completely cut off." In that janitor, accidents happen. Gasps rippled through the nurses, and residents gathered outside the doorway. Even the suited men looked uneasy. The color drained from Thomas's face. That's fake, she's lying." He pointed at Harold. "He doctored it." The officer raised a hand. "Enough. This recording, combined with witness statements, is more than enough for us to open an investigation." "No," Thomas shouted, lunging forward, but the officers restrained him with practiced ease. "You can't do this to me," he screamed as they hauled him toward the exit. "I'm your son." I stared at him, my heart breaking and healing all at once. "No, Thomas, you stopped being my son the day you abandoned me here." The automatic doors slid shut behind him, muffling his furious cries. For the first time in months, the nursing home felt peaceful. Over the next few weeks, the investigation moved quickly. The recording, along with Harold's detailed notes and testimony from several nurses who had overheard Thomas's threats, painted a damning picture. Thomas was charged with attempted coercion, elder abuse, and harassment. The lawyer Catherine vanished like smoke, likely to avoid being implicated in his schemes. And me. I felt lighter than I had in years. When the final legal papers were signed, my new will was locked safely in a bank vault. Every penny, every asset, every memory Richard and I had built, all of it now belonged to Harold. On my last evening in the nursing home, Harold and I sat together in the courtyard, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "You saved me, Harold," I said softly, "not just from Thomas, but from despair. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." He shook his head, tears glistening in his kind eyes. "No, Margaret, you saved yourself. I just stood by your side." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "When I'm gone, promise me you'll use what I've given you to build the life you and your daughter deserve." He nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise." A few weeks later, I passed away peacefully in my sleep. When Thomas finally returned, expecting to claim his prize, he was greeted not by wealth but by a locked office, a lawyer with cold eyes, and a single piece of paper: my will. As he read the words, his face twisted from confusion to horror to unbridled rage. "I, Margaret Whittaker, leave the entirety of my estate, including the family home and all financial assets, to Harold Jameson, who showed me love and loyalty when my own son abandoned me." Thomas screamed, tearing the paper into shreds, but it was too late. The world knew the truth now. Harold inherited everything, and he used it to open a small community center for underprivileged families, naming it after me and Richard. As for Thomas, he was left with nothing but his own bitterness. The last time anyone saw Thomas, he was standing outside the gates of the nursing home, shouting at the sky as if it would give him back what he'd lost. He had abandoned me, thinking I was weak and powerless. But in the end, it was he who was powerless, stripped of everything, exposed for who he truly was. And Harold, the quiet janitor he had mocked and threatened, now stood proudly at the ribbon cutting of the Margaret Whittaker Community Center, surrounded by grateful families and laughter. That was my final victory. Sometimes, revenge doesn't come in the form of anger or violence. Sometimes, it comes in the form of love, giving everything you have to someone who truly deserves it, while those who betrayed you are left with nothing but the emptiness inside them. I may not have lived to see Thomas's downfall with my own eyes, but I know he learned the harshest lesson of all. You can abandon a person, but you can never escape the consequences of your own cruelty. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell us in the comments what you think about Thomas's fate. Have you ever witnessed a moment of true justice like this? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of revenge, redemption, and unexpected heroes.